What up, everyone? Welcome to the Smoking Tire Podcast. This episode is brought to you by JB Weld. It's the world's strongest bond. Listen, pros have trusted this stuff for over 50 years, but you don't even need a pro half the time when you've got JB Weld's adhesive products. They make it so easy to do it yourself. When I need to get some home improvement done, I turn to JB Weld. Whether it's a DIY project, an automotive repair, plumbing, marine, or more, projects, big or small, glass, ceramics, anything you could think of, pretty much, JB Weld products have something for you. Keep it in the toolbox, keep it in the truck, keep it in the kitchen drawer. It'll always come in handy right when you need it. And speaking of trucks, JB Weld just acquired Herculiner, the original DIY truck bed liner. So if you're looking for the world's strongest truck bed liner, Herculiner's got you covered there as well. So go be your strongest self. Use JB Weld, the world's strongest bond. JB Weld epoxy products are proudly made in the USA and are available at jbweld.com, Walmart, Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, AutoZone, Advance Auto Parts, Napa, O'Reilly's, Michaels, and more. JB Weld, the world's strongest bond. We love the stuff around here. Here's an old familiar one. Haven't heard from him in a while, but man, do we love us, and Autotempest.com was there for us when we needed them. And this episode is brought to you by Auto Tempest, the one-stop shop for busy people looking to buy their next used car. Why is it for busy people? Because it brings all the used car sites on the internet to one place, saving you a ton of time. I talk to people about this all the time, and I should know, because all I have is my time. My time is my money. I sell my time. And if you can save time in your own life, therefore, transitive property, time is money, you save money. And I'm talking about Auto Tempest has nationwide listings from Cars.com, Car Soup, Cars Direct, TrueCar, eBay Motors, all brought in one place. They also let you compare with the results of all of Craigslist, not just a 200-mile radius. But that's not all. Auto Tempest is continuously improving, adding new sources of listings, new search filters, and most recently, adding search alerts so you can sign up to get emails when new listings matching your search show up. Guys, we're all busy people. Searching for your dream car shouldn't feel like a chore. Save the headache and enjoy your new car sooner with Autotempest.com. They've got all the cars in one search. Go to Autotempest.com/TST so they know that we sent you. Autotempest.com/TST. And we're brought to you today by Keeper Security, the leading cybersecurity platform for protecting individuals, families, and businesses against password-related cyber attacks, aka hacking. The fact is, you, me, everyone, we have too many passwords. Our life runs on passwords. And it's real easy to get lazy and reuse simple, familiar, trite passwords. And if you're running the same password over multiple accounts or cycling 1 to 3 fairly weak passwords, you are setting yourself up for a hack. If you're wasting time in the password reset loop, that's where you make a password, you don't log in for a while, you forget the password, you got to reset it again, and then you repeat until the end of time, you are doing it wrong. And if you're worried about your finances, the cost of a yearly Keeper subscription is absolutely nothing compared to the cost of a data breach. Not to mention when you got hacked, you have to worry about stopping payments, getting refunds, changing all of your bills, and on and on. What a nightmare. And when you get a new device, forget about it. It takes forever to re-log in to all of our apps and accounts again. You got to reset your phone, do it all over again. Nope. Keeper creates strong, unique passwords for every account wherever you log in, like you know you should, but then you keep them stored safely in your own encrypted vault. All you have to do is remember your master password, which also works with Face or Fingerprint ID, and you can access all of your strong passwords without having to actually remember them all. This keeps your information safe from hackers, gives you peace of mind. This is why every time I make a new account, I go to Keeper Security. This thing is great. We can't cancel passwords. They are part of our life. They're here to stay, but Keeper can make them manageable. Listeners of the Smoking Tire Podcast are going to get 30% off Keeper Unlimited and Family Plans. So use promo code SMOKINGTIRE30. That's promo code SMOKINGTIRE30 at checkout, or visit Keeper.com keeper.io/smokingtire to learn more. So that's keeper and use code SMOKINGTIRE30 at checkout, or keeper.io/smokingtire to learn more. This is a really helpful thing, guys. Make it a part of your life. Get your brain power back and exit that password loop. Keeper is the jam. And last but never, ever least, just parked in our number 4 position, my folks at Tradecraft Farms. Boy, have they got some new hotness on the shelves right now. Just dropped it off at the crib, and whoa! The finest THC and CBD products in Southern California, bar none. Absolutely, bar none. If it's legal where you're at, or you've come to California to visit us, kind folk out here, dude, grab some for yourself. But if you can't do that, if life doesn't turn that way, or if it's not legal where you're at, just give Tradecraft Farms a follow on Instagram. Tradecraft_farms on Instagram. Beautiful, pretty pictures, right? And if you live where this kind of stuff is mainstream right now, by all means, visit one of their retail locations or ask for it at your local dispensary. Tradecraft Farms is the official THC and CBD products of the Smoking Tire podcast. All right, folks, I have been very excited to do this show for a while. This person is incredibly interesting to me. She's a great follow on Twitter. Dr. Missy Cummings is a professor of human autonomy interaction at Duke University, studying how machines and people most optimally work together, and in fact some of the fallacies and myths surrounding the future of automation. I am so ready for this one. I can't wait. It's going to be super interesting for everybody. Dr. Missy Cummings on the Smoking Tire podcast. Missy, I am so excited to have you. This is amazing. I am like, when people come on whose work I'm really, really interested in, and I write down all these questions, like, this is like, I'm super excited. So thank you for your time.
You've done your homework.
In fountain pen. Look at that. I keep it OG, actually.
My students would do that.
They pay me better than they pay your students. No, I'm kidding.
Probably do.
I will have recorded the intro at home, but for those of you joining us live, Professor Cummings from Duke University is a professor of is it human machine integration? What do I call it? Is that right?
Yeah, interaction. That's close enough.
And presumably there are countless ways to apply such technologies, but the way that it interests me and our audience is cars. And cars that may one day drive themselves. And you have a lot of thoughts on it. I read your paper that Jason Torchinsky referenced in his excellent Jalopnik piece, and I found so many interesting things in it. But where I really want to start with is, why do you think the general public sees autonomous vehicles, generally privately owned autonomous vehicles, as an inevitability that we are just going to work towards and it's just like, that's where we're going to be?
So I think that's a really great question, because I think it depends on the group of people that you talk to. In the tech world, we see, people in Silicon Valley, for example, think it's an inevitability. People in Boston, maybe Seattle. But the average person in America does not see this as an inevitability.
Oh, really? Am I just I'm in the small bubble? Shit.
Well, I don't know if small is bad, but it is just a different bubble that I think, I don't mean to start getting sexist right off the bat, but, a man in your age group is the most likely to be in love with a Tesla and all this technology. So in your demographic, people think this is inevitable.
Interesting. Oh, I guess I got to get out more. Huh. All right. Well, I follow you on Twitter, so at least I have your input daily. Okay, so maybe they don't see it as inevitability, and it's just tech people and people who write about this kind of stuff. Okay, so that being said, those people, what are they so wrong about?
I think that I have two sides of this in my head when I'm thinking about these problems. In that I'm a futurist. That is my job as a robotics professor, is to look into the future and see what is going to happen and try to make very cool, nearly magical technologies come to fruition. So I think it's actually sweet, and I love that people are in love with this kind of technology. And so when I start coming down on Tesla and other car manufacturers for some of their self-driving vehicles, I'm coming down on them really because they're over promising to the point of putting the public at danger. I still very much want to see the technology develop. I think we've made incredible inroads into not just self-driving, but some very core basic autonomy reasoning technologies that we're going to have to use across many, many different domains. But I do think that companies, so individuals want to love the technology. They just want something magical in their lives. They want the magic. They want to believe that they can jump into a car and have it take them anywhere they want to go. So, I can, your average person who's in love with this technology, I don't blame them because they're optimistic. They want to be invested. I blame the companies that are saying, oh, yes, and you're going to have it. And here, let me give you a very dangerous technology. For example, Tesla's full self-driving that sounds like it's self-driving, but is actually, for any length of time, it's going to kill you.
Yeah, like Ed Niedermeyer, Ed Niedermeyer and yourself and Torchinsky have very eloquently written that it's actually more dangerous to have a technology that looks like it's doing the thing most of the time. And Alex Roy as well wrote about this. And have you be the person for covering that edge case and then giving you this double-edged sword of, well, if you interrupted the technology and got into a crash, it's your fault. But if the technology gets into a crash, well, you weren't monitoring the technology, which is a really nice bit of doublespeak, isn't it, when you're unleashing this thing on public roads, right?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting to me. It's not just in automotive space, but we love to blame operators for doing anything, right? We see someone screw up some kind of thing that has to do with technology, we want to jump on and blame the operator right away instead of kind of standing back and saying, well, what was the system design issue? Like if we're seeing multiple repeated problems with technologies, it can't all be dumb users. And, I think the Toyota acceleration case, in historically looking back, that was again one of these cases where everyone was so quick to jump on the drivers, and Toyota was very successful for a long time in blaming the drivers for the unintended acceleration, when in fact it was a software problem, right? So I think that's a good example of oftentimes we'll do some victim blaming because we want to make sure that this technology that we're in love with survives. And I think that what's wrong with that approach is this technology that we're dealing with today, it's going to survive in some fashion. But the longer that we keep our head down in the sand and refuse to admit that these technologies have problems, the longer it's going to take for us to actually get to viable technology.
Yeah, and I think you combine the two attitudes of like the predictable abuse on the part of the engineers who don't make it as idiot proof as they do. Instead, they make it as user controlled. It's like Action Park. It's the Action Park of advanced drivers.
It's not the
systems.
slide's fault.
Right. That combined with like the now I'm blanking on the term. It's man. Oh, I had something interesting.
I resemble that remark. I'm always it's always the tip of the tongue, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's doing the thing, right? But it's not at the most crucial moments. And they tell you that you should only use it this way and never use this way, but they don't build into the system the restraints that would prevent you from abusing it.
Right. Someone asked, and I'm bringing it up because it's perfectly apropos, why Tesla doesn't use eye tracking technology to verify the driver attention, which is like so they build this system, and like you said, they don't have the constraint where they go, well, if you don't look directly out the windshield all the time, the system turns off, and they don't want to. Maybe they don't want to, or I don't know why, but it'd be easy for them to avoid that, to then help sell the technology, because people that want to read a book while driving, they can't get away with it.
The user takes 100% of the risk, but the company gets 100% of the credit when it goes right. Mm-hmm. It's like borrowing all the risk on your users. It's crazy.
And Tesla, for the camera issue, they did just turn on the camera to start doing some driver monitoring. So even they have realized that they're going to have to do something. But I actually think, to your point, the bigger question is, if in all the Tesla owners' manuals, it tells you that you should not use full self-driving and or autopilot in all of these scenarios, including urban, divided highways, there's the list of where you should not be using the technologies is quite long in the owner's manual. So they tell you not to, but then you're allowed to, as opposed to something like GM Super Cruise where you are geo-fenced. So I think that ultimately, I think Tesla's going to be roasted over the coals in the legal system for this, because I think that actually when all these laws finally get in front of a jury, people are not going to find that that's convincing.
I thank God for the fountain pen. I outsmarted myself, and I had the thing I couldn't remember written down. It's predictable abuse combined with the break a few eggs mentality. It's okay to break a few eggs, the better good. But I've read, and I sort of side with the people who write that if you're developing a technology against a supposed backdrop of safety and not a backdrop of shiny new toy, backdrop of safety, then every improvement along the way must be safe, right? You don't get to do a dangerous thing and go, well, it's because we're going to be safe. Right?
Well, but with airplanes, when they were developing airplanes, they weren't very safe in the very, very beginning. Are you saying that every effort they made was to make them safe?
Passenger planes were pretty safe. And you still, you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you're saying. Like,
you still have to do a lot of certification to fly a plane and even press the autopilot button on an airplane. That you have to get to like thousands of hours of training before pressing an autopilot button.
Well, I mean, I start to hate to, now I'm gonna take Zach's side on this and say, no. So it is true that in the early days of aviation, there was a lot more unsafe behavior going on. But I think what has happened is that over time, because of all the crashes in aviation, both in the military and the commercial world, there have been all these procedures and processes and testing and evaluation, certification to make them safer. And I think what is really important about that point is that cars today, in just a very short time, I would actually say in just 5 to 10 years, they have made a significant step up where now the software in cars is much like, or maybe even more advanced than software in aircraft. And so overnight, the automotive industry has gone from being a fairly typical mechanical engineering system to being one of critical software safety. And while FAA has adapted in terms of a regulatory agency, in terms of laying down the rules for what it takes to have safe software, it just simply does not exist in the automotive world. And so I think that's really what's about to change is we're going to have to rethink across all transportation systems, when you put artificial intelligence in systems, how do we have to test and certify these things differently, more like aircraft as opposed to the way we did in the past?
Oh, that's a point taken. Absolutely point taken on that one. Can you talk to me real quick about the way that humans interact, the way humans drive a car, and why that is so difficult for a computer to replicate? I mean, I realize that's a very broad topic, but what I'm getting to is top-down and bottom-up reasoning and your idea of brittleness. That's where I was leading to, and you can jump ahead of where I started if you'd like.
Well, it's a really tough topic, and I think, and hopefully you guys can link up that paper that I sent you, the one that Jason Torchinsky wrote about. But
Can
it
you
really
just remind me of the
comes down
title really
to
quick? That I didn't write down.
it's rethinking the maturity of artificial intelligence.
Thank you.
And so it's about, it tells you that there's essentially 4 stages of reasoning that any entity, whether or not we're talking about a human or a computer-based autonomous system, has to go through before it can handle a system under all possible circumstances. And at the lowest level, you have something called skill-based reasoning. And this is for humans learning to keep an aircraft in balanced flight, for example, or keeping a car between the white lines on the road. It's the basic mechanics of keeping the vehicle in motion. And then once you've learned that, you can free up your spare cognitive resources then to address the rules of the road or the rules of the system that you're operating in. And so drivers, once they learn to keep between the white lines, then they can visually attend to the stop signs and the traffic lights, and they understand what those means, and they understand how those rules relate not just to themselves, but the other entities in the system. Then once you can understand keeping the car in motion, obeying the rules, then you can start reasoning under uncertainty. And this is what we call knowledge-based reasoning. And in this picture that I've drawn, you can actually see the reason you need judgment under uncertainty is because uncertainty grows in complicated situations where you may not have all the information that you need. So the classic driving example is the ball rolls in front of the car. Right. Everybody sees this in traffic school, but it is actually a really great example for AI. A human sees the ball, which is bottom up. So we actually, our sensors can take in the information just like maybe a computer vision camera can. And then our brain goes into your head and says, all right, what are all the scenarios that could go with this ball? It could be a kid. It could be a soccer field nearby. What are the odds that there's going to be a child that's running out into the street chasing this ball? And then when you imagine that scenario, you actually then refocus your sensors in the world to start looking for confirming evidence. That whole process that I just talked about only happens in AI-based systems if there are a very clear set of rules, and that assuming the sensor actually picked up the right ball and then was able to correctly classify it. But if that scenario wasn't exactly coded in that way, computer reasoning cannot get to it, cannot get to this point of imagining what could happen in the future. And because cars can't imagine, it's not just cars, because any autonomous system cannot imagine, this necessarily limits what it can do. And this is where we see this brittleness. And also in this paper I show, look, a stop sign, most computer vision systems in cars today can recognize a stop sign on a nice, bright, sunny day. But the instant you start getting leaves and foliage or snow on top of the stop sign, even the best neural nets that have been trained millions and millions of images, because the snow on the stop sign or maybe the glint on the stop sign makes it just appear slightly different, that can really destroy the classification. And can't sense the world, then you can't start executing rules, and you certainly can't figure out what to do under high degrees of uncertainty when there's a multi-car pileup, when there's snow and people are sliding all over the highway. So it's still this area of knowledge and expert-based reasoning where people have to reason under maximum uncertainty. We're not even close. It's not, I would even argue in my lifetime, it's not going to be within the realm of computers to do that.
I mean, that's kind of after reading some other stuff, and then especially this, it seems like the difference between knowledge and expert is vast, really vast, to the point where it's like, okay, skill is what a car enthusiast might learn at 5 years old. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Rule is what you learn at like 14 or 15 when you get your learner's permit. You know, like the knowledge is like kind of an experienced driver, but like maybe not that good. And then like expert is like F1 level driving.
Right.
Like perfect. And
Yep.
like how it would
Right.
be, but in an open world, in a completely open world, is the terminology right? There's effectively no set of rules, right? Because infinite things could happen.
Right. That's exactly right. Because infinite things can happen, you can't be expected to code under every situation. And
Like that
I
quote
tell
miles
people,
of data thing doesn't work if infinite things are happening. You could literally never have enough data to cover infinite.
Right. They could, they'd be like, we never programmed for this. We
Yeah.
never planned for it. We never saw it.
so Tesla's head engineer, autonomy engineer, gave a talk recently, and he was bragging, we've got 1 million images trained in the system, like a million. I mean, that's not even close to what you're going to need. A trillion is what you're going to have to be able to have in the real world. And even that may not be enough.
Yeah, it's crazy. So then talk to me about the concept of brittleness. It's related to the rules.
Right. So we call artificial intelligence based on neural nets, we call this a brittle technology because for that reason that if it sees a slightly different presentation of data, it can't reason at all. It can't think. It can't make a reasonable guess. So I think that the most interesting illustration lately that's been circulating around Twitter and the internet is the fact that Tesla's full self-driving sees the moon as a stoplight. It can't reason that the yellow, circle in the sky, it must be a stoplight. It can't possibly be the moon. And it just goes, that shows you right there
Someone
where
needs to tweet
Tesla
Elon. Elon, program moon. And he'll be like, okay. And then maybe they'll program it. But that's how you do customer service over there. You actually have to tweet at Elon, and then you get a service appointment.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the problem with this is, okay, first they have to go get 1 million images of the moon 20 degrees over the horizon, and then 25 degrees over the horizon, and 2 degrees over. Like, that's actually the problem is, you know what, the moon can show up in a lot of different places. And yes, with enough data, you could probably do that. But the other hidden gotcha of
The moon is a good example. Do you always use the moon? That's a perfect example. The moon, because everywhere it's different. It's different. It doesn't matter where you have to program everywhere for all moons.
Or if it's cloudy.
It's impossible.
If there's smoke in the air.
That's crazy. To see green
blue
lights
moon,
everywhere.
purple moon.
So wait, let me ask you something. Go ahead, Zach, please.
Is a lot of what they're doing, we're talking about the trillion images thing. So if I say, okay, well, if they don't have a photo of a semi-truck that is starting to overturn and spill a bunch of rubber balls on the road that the car has to avoid, so they don't have that picture. If that situation happens, does the autopilot crash? Are they just saying, well, yes, but somewhere in our library we have a photo of a truck coming to a stop and cars avoiding it, so our cameras will see that avoidance, and whatever else is actually going on doesn't really matter? Or is what you're saying the brittleness is if the computer sees something it's never seen before, even if 80% of what it's seeing it has a library or a reference for, it can throw it off. It can make it freeze.
Well, you've given me a great idea for next test. I would love to do this. Truck tips over, balls flowing everywhere across the road. So it is the fact that in any orientation of the truck that it has never seen before, it will not understand it as a truck. So the truck on the road,
Well, I mean, based on their recent crashes, that's true. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, but the instant it tips over, it won't see it.
Oh, so
wow,
is that why that
T-Rex.
crash? Well, that crash in China, there was a turned over semi truck, and the guy just ran into the side. So it's because it didn't see the wheels; it just saw a white box and went, "Well, this isn't a truck. I guess I'll keep going," even though because
It was that, or not
reference for a
discerning
white
it
box.
from sky, just seeing white on the road. It just thought sky.
Wow.
That's happened a few times, I think, in America.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
But
Wow.
I mean, if anything that's not on its wheels immediately becomes invisible, you have a real problem.
I saw an overturned car yesterday with a camper.
Oh man,
people were okay, but there was a situation that I happened to see.
a crash happened right in front of me yesterday that autonomous vehicles would not have helped. aggressive lane splitting on PCH in Malibu on a Sunday by a group of people on sport bikes. I don't want to use the G word, but it was a group of people on sport bikes being real loud about their presence. And lane splitting pretty much standstill traffic at 30 to 40 miles an hour.
That's a lot.
A Ferrari 812 was slowly changing lanes, and a female biker on what appeared to be a Triumph Bonneville, which was an interesting choice for that particular crowd, endo over the front of it. She sailed, the bike tumbled, and when we finally got there, the cops were there unbelievably fast. The cops were there in about 60 seconds. And when we finally passed, this woman is wearing Daisy Dukes, a tank top, and like a ping pong helmet, and has like, she's gonna need a dozen skin grafts. Like, just bad. So many bad choices were made that day.
Wow.
Yeah. So sorry to side
gear?
rail, but it was egregious. To go back to this, since this infinite rule set exists, right? And humans are like really particularly good at discerning what's going on. If a truck turns over, we can see that the truck is turning over, and we kind of figure out what to do. We don't even really need to be taught that. Why do we even prefer the computer? Why do we see that as a desirable alternative?
I think that a lot of people see it as a desirable alternative. You know, I mean, I spent a lot of time in LA. I know exactly what those drives are like. It can be miserable and horrible, and we all feel like we could be doing something better with our time. And so I think people do imagine in their head, it's almost like they have a natural recall back to the Jetsons, that is the bridge to the future, right? If I can have my car do everything for me, and then I can do everything else that I want. In fact, in the early days of self-driving car, I had a lot of companies asking me to consult them. There were people trying to come up with getting your hair done in a van. So there was a company that was going to, have a mobile hairdressing station. So you would, on the way to work, you would jump into the mobile hairdressing station.
Oh my God, on the move? Get out of here.
They're hair.
Scissors?
Yeah, I know.
Now, for the record, there's a mobile barber shop that I see extremely regularly. They park up on the beach in Venice by where I live. I live in Venice, Missy, and they just park up on the beach in a nice sunny spot, and it's a nice Sprinter van that's like all done up on the inside, like a really nice, barber shop, cigar lounge kind of hipster thing, and they do cuts.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Just not while it's moving.
Static.
Yeah,
static cuts.
Sure.
Yeah, but people want to take that and make it roll.
No. The only time we like that, the things that are on the move or they shouldn't be, no offense, strip clubs. A strip club rolling on the move is a fun novelty, if you've ever experienced that.
I have not. It seems like if someone has to hit the brakes, though.
Well, that's why, because you never know. It could be an adventure.
Then you get charged extra immediately.
No, they signed the waiver. What can I do?
Okay, but I'm just telling you now what you've done is you've given somebody who is going to make a business plan based on that idea that you said. Now we're going to have rolling strip clubs with no driver because it's going to be self-driving. We're going to save the money.
I know.
Right.
I know. Stop writing this down. And if you do, I want to cut.
And they're going to get $2 billion in investments.
I know. You wrote a lot about a relevant environment versus a realistic environment and why it's important for everybody to understand the difference. And we touched on it with the word infinite earlier, but can you go even further with what those terms are and how the two converge accidentally in the vernacular?
Right. So the military has been working on, and indeed for the longest time, the big advances came in the military for technologies that, they'd be developed first in the military and then they'd be, the internet, for example, is one of these technologies that first came from the military and then theoretically, was let loose in society. So a lot of research has looked at what happens if you have cool, sexy demos and then you decide based on a sexy demo that that technology is ready to go, and then you put that technology in development. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And so it's been established for many, many years that if you base your development decisions based on a cool, sexy demo that was done in a sort of realistic environment, but not the actual full testing environment, then you're probably going to end up losing your money. And indeed, the Government Accountability Office did a study, and they showed that every major system for the military that was funded based on a cool, sexy demo without waiting for it to mature a little bit and get to this point of being able to perform in real environments, in not just one or two environments, all those systems failed. They all failed. And
what does that sound like? Does that sound like anything you've ever heard?
Well, nobody asked me first.
It's just because your study talks about, all this shit that Elon shovels. Someone has always been there before and failed at it. And the lesson was not learned, but he figured out how to shine it and sell the fantasy before the reality was there.
You think someone's been here before, though?
No. Like the technologies in terms of when they're not this exact technology,
okay.
but
the pitfalls
deploying a half-baked technology to the people who paid for it before it's ready is not usually good. That was the lesson that I think has not been learned. So what is it that even though all these videos are out there of the full self-driving on YouTube and doing horrible things and just being really bad at driving, why don't people really understand the implications of operating something like that? Why don't people understand that, even when people write articles about people doing dangerous things with this stuff, the articles never, ever mention anybody outside the car. Ever. Why is that?
I mean, it's always just focused on the driver could crash.
It's so dangerous to the people in the car who are doing this dangerous thing. And people who buy these cars have access to this dangerous technology that could endanger them. But there I am on my motorcycle. What about fucking,
that's an interesting psychological question of even why the public or the news or whoever focuses on the individual doing the thing that they find dangerous.
Yeah, which they paid for and sort of in a way opted into. They're being defrauded, I think, but they opted into something, whereas guy next to them didn't opt into anything, right? Isn't that super dangerous, Missy?
Yeah, no, this is actually something I've been nagging about for a long time. The Uber death in their self-driving tests, the pedestrian death, first of all, it ended Uber's role in self-driving, right? That eventually led to Uber not being in that game anymore. And that was a real wake-up call for the rest of the industry. Indeed, Waymo and Cruise have had permission for almost a year now to operate without safety drivers, to do real driverless operations in San Francisco, and they haven't. And so the fact that they've been able to, but they're not, that suggests to me that this pedestrian and bicyclist problem is serious. So, yes, pedestrians are in danger, but also bicyclists probably, I think, are at the highest danger of having something happen to them around the cars, because they can move a little bit faster than pedestrians, and coming out from behind a truck or from around a corner. The cars, again, they don't have an imagination. They don't recognize, for example, when they're near a college campus or a high bike area. Mm-hmm. These types of decision making has not yet been imbued inside these systems. And so I do think, and indeed I'm not the only one, that there are several bicycling advocacy groups that are lobbying big time in DC to stop these technologies from being put on the road without more testing.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the Uber accident, because in that particular case, that vehicle, which was a modified XC90 Volvo, I believe, was being operated by an employee of Uber whose paid, understood job it was to monitor that vehicle. And, obviously the car didn't do its job, and she didn't quite do her job, and this is what happens, right? And she got complacent, I think, in the way that a lot of people who have access to lesser versions of this. But Missy, the fact that this one death put Uber out of business when faced with accountability for the death in terms of autonomous vehicle research, whereas many people have died in Tesla vehicles that were using the autopilot software at the time. But the blame, you know what I mean? The Tesla's still in business. They're still selling this stuff. Why is the difference in accountability between the two so important?
Because we could blame her, right? We could blame the safety driver who, in theory, should have been able to, if she'd been doing her job, then, that's what the blame game is. I can blame that one person. And because I can blame her, we feel better about the technology. And indeed, that's what we're doing for every single Tesla death, is that we blame the driver. So Joshua Brown, Jeremy Banner, Walter Huang. I mean, these were all some of the very early accidents where people died very horrific deaths. And especially for Walter Huang, who was playing a game on his iPhone, we know that for sure. You can read the National Transportation Safety Board report about it. But, everybody jumps on that fact and then starts going in to blame the passenger. But I think that there have continued to be so many high-profile cases. Indeed, there was just recently one a couple of weeks ago in California, I think in San Diego, where a teenager died when he was rear-ended by a Tesla that autopilot blew through an intersection. So I do think that eventually you're going to see a change, because these lawsuits, and there are a number of them, will eventually hit the courts. I have to stop. I've got a line of lawyers in a holding pattern in my life that I cannot answer all their calls. I can't help the number of lawyers that want me to help them in these cases. So I know firsthand that there is a groundswell of legal activity. And what's unfortunate about this is the country we live in, because the regulatory agencies will not step in and do anything. The only avenue that consumers have now is through the legal system, and that's going to be exercised.
One of the great things I learned about growing up is the misconception that if it's legal, it must be okay. You know what I mean? And if it's illegal, it must be bad. So, I think a lot of people, what you might call, I don't know, normies, whatever, regular folks, well, they go, you can buy this. This is something you can just buy. How bad could it be? If it was so dangerous, there's no way they could sell it.
Right. Well, we believe there's a vetting process, but tobacco,
but it turns out,
started in, that's pretty much like what we need to say.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of something that is terrible for you and yet legal for sale.
How I
think that because we want to believe that the technology is close at hand and it's mature enough and ready to go. But the regulatory agencies have been, especially in surface transportation, has been completely absent through these years. And then the companies look at the stock price. That actually has done so much for advancing potential unsafe technology. It boggles my mind that the stock price is as insane as it is for Tesla, that keeps putting pressure on government agencies, even inside the state of California. So I just told you, the state of California has said it is okay for Waymo and Cruise to be doing self-driving in San Francisco. I don't think it is. But you know what? I don't think that, but I'm not an elected official, so it's easy for me to say that. They're the ones who are trying to walk a fine line between promoting innovation, jobs, money, taxpayers, as opposed to then what is doing what's right.
Do you think that Waymo and these companies haven't moved forward with that because they know that if there's one mistake that happens, that's it for them? Like if they If they do 6 months of successful testing with no safety driver, and then a cyclist gets killed, like, do you think that would just bury that company?
Yes. I don't know about bury completely, but I think it would terminate a lot of money that had been invested in a concept of operations that then would never come to pass. I also still don't think it's going to come to pass whether or not they kill someone. It would just end it sooner. And they know that. And so I think the companies have been very reluctant to then, be able to exercise the mode of operations that is permitted by law in California. But I'll tell you what bothers me also in that same vein is something that I do a lot of consulting on and interacting with various agencies are, you would not believe the number of cities that are actually changing their urban architecture planning and how they think they're going to design cities because they're just sure that self-driving cars are coming.
Oh,
and so
no.
there are cities who are trying to build parking lots at the edge of town because they're just so sure that the cars are going to drop off people in the downtown areas, and then the cars are going to have to go someplace and kind of do circling or park or wait for their owners and then come back. And then when I tell these urban architects, they want to fight
Landscape
me.
architects.
You're absolutely wrong.
That seems like extremely poor city plan. I mean, the good news is at least they're on the out. At least they're not putting them in the middle of the city. At least it's on the outskirts, and so whatever. Turn it into a Formula Drift circuit if you have to. But like, I'd be surprised. Rather than saying, okay, you can operate these things in San Francisco, why not have like a Truman Show town built somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you can pay people to like walk around and Truman show it up, walk different loops around the city and cycle around and test these cars around voluntary participants, Or is it that Waymo and Cruise and all these other companies are just like, they're just kind of bummed that they don't have customers to offload the risk onto. They have no choice but to accept the risk because they don't have customer vehicles that they can make people just sign a waiver.
Well, if there's no safety
data.
driver, they also don't have anyone to blame, right?
Right. True.
Well, there have been companies actually do have some of these private campuses that you're talking about. Indeed, University of Michigan has something they even call M City, and they get a lot of work and they do a lot of research and contract engineering for companies in their M City to do exactly what you were saying. Of course, the problem with that is it's so well controlled, you're not actually getting to the degrees of uncertainty that you would have in the real world. And if you haven't seen that hilarious video in Arizona where the Waymo car gets stymied by the single orange construction cone, boy, I just love that exists because it perfectly illustrates everything that I've been talking about, which is construction zones, number one, are a huge, huge problem for not just self-driving cars, but Teslas, any kind of driving assist. Anything relying on computer vision really struggles around construction zones because no construction zone is ever the same construction zone, and it changes dynamically even throughout one shift of a construction zone. Yeah. And in this video, you'll see that the lone orange cone actually defeats the car, and then the passenger has to actually be rescued by the Waymo SWAT team to come get the hostage out of the car. And what's kind of funny about this, it's kind of funny to me because I'm in the business, is this is kind of the first time that I think people got to see the fact that there is a mobile SWAT team running around that's having to shadow these passengers. And what most people don't know about Waymo and any other
Oh, wait, you literally mean
space.
a Waymo SWAT team. For a minute, I thought you meant like they had to call the actual SWAT team and it was a thing. No. Oh, you mean there's like I get it, like a clandestine tailing vehicle. Oh, that's worse. That's way worse.
Yeah.
That's way worse.
Well, and then they had these these remote operation centers, I've been asking for Waymo to be more transparent about that so that people can understand these remote operation centers. It's not clear how many people are inside. And so, for example, if you've got, let's say, 10 cars running around Mesa, Arizona, but you have to have 100 people inside the remote operation center to monitor them and make sure they're safe, then that business case is never going to scale.
I mean, it's just the most Silicon Valley assumption ever that the human is the problem here. And with enough technology, we can solve for the human, even if it takes 10 times as much human technology to solve for the one human, as opposed to just like, let's just train our base level humans a little better. Let's just make that a baseline. Like that's just crazy to me. It really is. It's just wild. That we're so willing to put this stuff on the street. Like, do you ever think about, Missy, that the last 20 minutes of like any future movie ends with like a human wrestling control back from some kind of autonomous vehicle and or finding some old carbureted thing to drive in the hero scene? Has that ever like occurred to you?
It is funny because when people ask me what I drive, I think that because I'm a robotics professor and an engineer, they expect me to have something fancy. But, when I recently bought a Jeep Wrangler and I got manual windows. You actually have to.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
It's just so.
I know. And so, and then my daughter was like, what is this? Where's the button? Where's the button? So I actually find that in my own life, I see that there's just so much automation and all the complexity that goes with that. When I grew up as a kid, my dad fixed his cars and he taught me how to change oil and change spark plugs and really, and and that's what got me into engineering. I loved the fact that I could work on my car and fix my car. And I'm actually very psychotic about it. I feel like I have to fix everything in the house, which means that I end up calling a lot of repairmen, particularly electricians, to fix what I screw up. but we don't do that anymore, right? And this is actually what I think one of the interesting things that the Biden administration is starting to look at is this idea about the right to repair. Whatever tractors, for example, we see this a lot in John Deere. Like, at what point does the complexity of this vehicle that you have become so high? Again, they're becoming like aircraft that you can't actually fix even minor things, that everything has to be taken to the shop. And that's not going to be great for the farming community. But I also think what that means is it's making humans further away from understanding the technology that they operate in their everyday lives.
Sure. Yeah, no, I really believe that there's certain, if you look at anything, either whether it's mundane or complex, I feel like that thing will reach a technological peak of an apex of like usefulness and durability and simplicity. You know what I mean? Where those things are kind of in harmony. And then beyond that, it's just like bloat. You know what I mean? Like my wife and I are renovating a house and everyone's all like, oh, a smart home. You're gonna have the thing and you gotta be able to adjust your air conditioning while you're in fucking New York. Of course. Why wouldn't you want that? And I'm like, keys, switches, thermostats. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like I've lived in houses that were built in the 40s that had like switches that worked just fine. Like, let's stick with that. Yes. You know what I mean? And I think I believe we're past peak car. We talk about this as well. We think we are post the driving experiences available as well. We think that happened about 10 to 15 years ago.
Yes, although I do wonder if, what is old is new again. will we see some kind of sine wave that brings us back to then all of a sudden everybody's going to get rid of their nest? There'll be some cybersecurity hack. I mean, I teach a class in cybersecurity at Duke. It's a big, scary world out there, and anything digital, when anything bad happens, and that, EMP pulse that, you see in the movie comes, knocks everything out, which isn't real, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
But
Isn't that Die Hard 4? I think that's Die Hard 4.
I think there's going to be kind of a backlash. It's not that we're going to become Amish, but I think that there will be a cycle in the next 10-ish years where that will actually be what sells. Simpler will sell.
I think so. I love, in the world of cars, Porsche, which we talk about a whole lot, they've got the Taycan, the electric car. They've got a variety of hybrid cars. Their sports cars are all turbocharged with direct injection, and they have dual clutch gearboxes and stuff like that. But the one that everybody wants, the one that's hard to get, that really drives the enthusiasm for the brand, is the one without turbos. It's rear-wheel drive and stick shift. That's the one that really drives the enthusiasm for that brand. And I think that they're going to have to find a way to keep those real Halo enthusiast products going. But hey, I wanted to ask you real quick, because you brought up, the perils of the smart home and stuff like that. In your paper, you talked about adversarial machine learning, and I thought that was a really interesting concept. Can you tell me about that? Tell us about that for just a second, and then we have a bunch of interesting questions from our fans if you've got a few more minutes to spare.
Sure.
Okay.
So adversarial machine learning, it's an emerging area of research, and that sounds cool, but if I'm telling you that there's an emerging area of research that could significantly cripple not just self-driving cars, but driving assist cars, boy, we are in serious trouble, because academics are just now starting to realize, it turns out in kind of that Pandora's box classic gotcha, that wherever we have deep learning neural networks, which powers every computer vision algorithm, lots of natural language processing and other applications, anywhere where you've got that, it turns out that these systems can be defeated. I wouldn't say easily, but if you're in the business and you know what you're doing, it's actually not that difficult to defeat a neural net. True in cars, true in facial recognition. So this becomes a huge problem.
Cars. It's not hard.
Right.
It's not very hard in a car. You just learned that.
Right.
Yeah, that's adversarial Rubbermaid orange rubber learning.
We don't know a hacker didn't put that cone there. We don't know that.
Yeah. They did. They keystroked that cone, right? It was like there was a lot of it was definitely a mechanical. It was a mechanical keyboard of some kind. It was definitely a keyboard enthusiast that made that cone there. No, sorry, we took a left.
Yeah, no, but I think that the Mobileye example, where Mobileye went out and they put some duct tape on the middle part of the 3 that sticks out, and they kind of extended that 3 just a little bit, and they were able to trick a Tesla into seeing that speed limit sign as 85 miles an hour, and indeed the car accelerated.
We call that that's called a cannonball. Speed limit 155. You've seen the first few minutes of Cannonball Run. That's a well-known move. I mean, Brock Yates did that in 79, man. We haven't solved for that. I thought Elon's only seen 5 movies. One of them must have been Cannonball Run.
That actually, somebody needs to ask him that. I'm not sure he has.
We determined about 3 years ago that the only 2 movies he's ever seen is Spaceballs and Total Recall. You can trace everything he's ever done in his professional life back to one of those 2 films. It's in the beginning when it was ludicrous mode, I was like, oh, this is fun. I like Spaceballs. He's doing a bit, and that's fun. I wasn't anti Elon Musk until he started putting this garbage on the street and telling people that their cars were about to drive themselves.
His robot pet, the Mog.
When they were just fun EVs with Spaceballs names, I was like, oh, that's cool. Carry on, sir. You know what I mean? 2012, 2013, Model S Elon, that was cool. There's nothing wrong with a 2013 Model S. It was all like, when he was like, you could be on your couch and your car will drive here from New York next year. Pay me $10,000 now. It's like, what? And then people paid.
Well, and now subscriptions. He's even up that game.
How long until you can download an NFT of Elon's 4 p.m. thoughts to your Tesla screen while not driving?
Well, he's got deep brain. You've just given him a great business idea. We should go patent this idea before he steals.
God, we have to. We have to. I did just see that you could get a Netflix. You could log into your Netflix subscription from your fucking Tesla. Thank God for that. Ugh.
So that when you're parked until someone
there'll be
figures out
no
the
way to
yeah.
defeat that system.
Right.
Definitely. They'll make you check a box saying you're parked.
There
That'll
you go.
be able to be checked at 90 miles an hour. Your connected car will have no idea.
Meanwhile, most cars won't let a passenger enter any information into the screen, even if that sensor is being depressed by someone's ass.
But, oh boy. Okay. Do you have time for a few questions from the fans?
Sure.
All right. Let's see. Ryuka Chu says, last time I was in the AV industry, working at Cruise, about 2 years ago, everyone had hit basically a plateau where progress towards human-like driving had really slowed to a crawl. Has the industry gotten past that yet?
No.
One-word answer. Well, I love it. I love it. Mark Bass says, how cool is it to fly jets in the Navy? Yeah, like the coolest thing you've actually done, we didn't even discuss for 1 second because the thing you're doing now is so relevant to our show. But that is an awesome gig before the gig, I might add. Uh-oh. You know, you'd think somebody who does robots would have good Wi-Fi.
Someone said that in the comments, which I think I said, you know what? Internet monopolies are to blame, probably not.
Listen,
her
professors
house.
don't necessarily make a lot of money. The super Wi-Fi here, if you're a professor, you're not getting it. It's really expensive.
Also depends on where you live.
Yeah,
you know?
sometimes you just can't. I hope she comes back. What an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Please, I hope Missy comes back. Please click the link again.
Click the link.
And return. I'm going to throw in my hat into the ring. I'm not an expert in automation, but I like to think I'm an expert in driving and people. Why is it better to license bad or dangerous drivers than early release potential dangerous technology? First off, at the time they take the test, they are not bad or dangerous drivers. They have to demonstrate that they are the opposite, in fact.
When you're a kid, you are focused on that and terrified.
And they fail people. People fail their driving tests, they fail their written, and they fail their practical, okay? And also, humans, individuals, are imperfect, right? And a human that is in control of a vehicle and makes a mistake that is imperfect, like an accident, can be forgiven. Now, we have other control systems. They're not perfect, but you've got police, you've got cameras in certain places, and if you get too many tickets, or if you get a DUI, or if you have reckless driving and crashes, like, they take your license away. So we do have controls for those individuals. You can argue that they're not enough, you can argue that they're not that good, but they do exist. Technology is systematic. It goes through committee. It's sold at a profit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Someone's making money off of this. Someone's paying money for it. And that's with the expectation that it's fully developed. And not only are they paying for it and selling it, but it's being operated in, like Missy said, an infinite environment full of infinite things. And it's being around, like, no matter what boxes you check on that thing saying, I understand how this works and I agree to use it properly or whatever, like, if it's half baked, everyone around in the world around you has not taken that same, whereas it's understood that everyone who's driving a car has passed a driving test at some point in their life.
It's also, I think it hints at the cost and the complexity of driving. The fact that you can train a 15-year-old, let's just say a blanket statement for the country, excuse me, you can train a 15-year-old to drive a car and teach them the rules of avoid these things, stop at that thing, and their brain is going to see a truck turning with a water buffalo painted on the side, and it's going to recognize it as a truck, and that person's going to stop.
Something's happening in my left ear. Are you there?
Hey.
Oh, it's the return. Hi, welcome back. But wow, I'm so glad you're back, and you're loud loud and clear. Perfect.
Oh, good.
Wait, and you actually we got like a quarter of what you said about flying fighter jets, which I'm pretty sure the rest of what we didn't hear was very interesting. And now that you're back, can you say what you said again?
Yeah, I just said, did you hear the part where I said that I have so many fun stories
Yes.
to tell when I go out drinking? Right. And then after that, I said, but I also saw a lot of people die and literally crash and die because they misunderstood the automation, and the systems were designed in a way that the automation was not designed to work with humans and instead worked against them. So people lost their lives.
How did you feel when you saw a consumer vehicle with a technology included on it called autopilot?
I see this all the time. People want to replicate the world of a fighter jet inside their car. It's cool, and it makes you feel cool, but it's never a good thing because a car is not a plane, and autopilots in the planes are far more capable, but they're also far simpler, and they don't have to contend with the same complexity of the world. So I get why somebody would want to call it that, but there was never any chance that it was going to come out well, because it's lulling people into a false sense of security that something that they want to believe is true about their car is just simply not ever going to happen.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. Let's see. Lee says, why is it okay to license bad or dangerous drivers than to release potentially dangerous technology early? And actually, the other question, which we attempted to answer ourselves in your presence, but I definitely want your take on, is why is it okay to have a bad driver on the road, but it's not okay to deploy a dangerous system? And my answer was that we can forgive a human, and whereas you're talking about a systematic thing that is for profit and half-baked and being sold to people who believe it is a complete system, and also that we have controls for bad drivers, tickets, license suspensions, insurance premiums, etc. But your take.
So I agree with all those statements, but I would also tell you that we don't know what it means then to be a good driver in terms of autonomy. When we license drivers, we make them take a vision test. We make them take a rules of the road test. We put them in an actual driving test so that we can get some real information, data about how well that they can work inside that ecosystem. And that is one of the big problems that we're facing right now from a regulatory framework, is that we have no comparative tests. And we desperately need a vision test. Since we know that the perception systems are the long pole in the tent, we need to come up with a vision system that these cars must pass. Can it see a stop sign with a bunch of leaves across it? If it can't understand that's a stop sign, then it shouldn't be on the road.
Jay John says, are there parts of the built environment, meaning I guess our existing infrastructure, that could be regulated or controlled such that autonomous systems could be used in them by making such spaces exclusively for AV uses? Meaning, what about take an existing urban environment and say no human-driven cars, AVs only? What about something like that?
So this does get talked about quite a bit, and it would work, meaning if you could drive down the uncertainty, if you could have concrete barriers on either side of an AV lane on a highway, and basically you would make it a train, right? Because you're putting it on rails so that you drive down that uncertainty. So that would work, and we potentially could have that. The problem is, then what do we get for it? Does that even make sense? How would you then get the car from home to the AV lane where it could then operate safely? And so I think that both the practicality of doing it and also the cost, it's not even clear that cost could, would this even make sense to to have those kinds of cars, who would own those cars, who would operate those cars. So I think there's still a lot of issues to be worked out, but I'm not ruling it out.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to adapt the infrastructure, like, let's build some public transit. That seems way more effective for traffic decongestion and stuff than building some dedicated thing that looks like a train line but is only for something very rich people can afford. Yeah, like that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. J. John also says, and I'm going to modify your question, J. John. It says, the question is, do we know the fatalities per million miles driven for Tesla or other mass market self-driving? And how does that compare to standard human driving? And I believe that it's unfair to make a direct comparison to the so-called average driver. And instead, I think you should make a comparison to like a very, very well-trained professional driver. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I could agree with you on that point. I think what's more important and what's missing is transparency in the data. I'm not entirely sure that if we actually did have Tesla's data, they gave it to us, and they didn't select which data points. I'm not entirely sure that they're being honest, meaning I think that if you look at all the accidents and we could know when autopilot was involved and when it wasn't involved, you might have a much more dangerous driver. So that's actually one of the problems with a lack of transparency and independent reporting is even the regulatory agencies like the National Transportation Safety Board, they're reliant on what Tesla gives them.
All right. If you believe, not you, Missy. I know I'm with you 100%, and everyone else out there pretty much knows at this point where I am on all this stuff. But if people out there are as infuriated as me that this stuff has been deployed on public roads without the rest of our consent, what can an individual do? Not everybody has a podcast, but like what do you write somebody? Can you is there any kind of action that can be taken?
I would first suggest that people reach out to their local congressmen and senators and contact them you can do it on their online forms and really say that you do not want self-driving cars on the road en masse. There's actually legislation pending right now. So this is the right time. If you want to say something about it, you should say something about it because it could really have an impact. I also think that people need to vocalize and continue on places like Twitter and Facebook. This is actually where social media can make a difference. So I do have some friends in various high places in DC, and you would be amazed at how much what people say on Twitter eventually percolates up to the top. So there are people tracking those trends, and it has not gone unnoticed that there's people clamoring for change. And so, I think being vocal, but being respectful and vocal, unlike the Tesla fanboys, which, if they get a hold of this podcast, I'm going to have to mute another 1,000 men who scream at me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's tough when you're financially, whether you're a true believer or you're an investor that has been financially incentivized to drink and repeat the Kool-Aid. I mean, it's when misinformation and exaggeration of capability is so profitable, you almost can't blame people. You know what I mean? It's hard.
Well, I teach game theory, so I understand game theory. I know how to game it, but then I also think that gives people like me who are independent researchers, the onus is on us to stand up and then say, nope, that's not scientific, that's not fact, that is not what is going to happen. And, unfortunately, this is why I've got the line of lawyers out my door. Unfortunately, there are just not that many people who are willing to stand up and say, this isn't right and you need to do something about it. It is interesting to me how we can take a technology like, the driver assist in Tesla, and it can be so patently bad and be literally killing people. and nothing is done. So I think it says a lot about where we are in society in terms of love of technology. That's why I think there's going to be a snapback, because the pendulum is way over here and it's about to, swing to the other side.
Buy manual transmission cars, people. Buy manuals. Zach's playing Lord Thirds. This conversation, I've really enjoyed this hour. This hour's been really, really interesting for me. So I really want to thank you for your time. But it feels like we've been negative about a lot of stuff. We've been really down on this technology. Let's go out with, like, what is it in your line of work where you see this technology doing the most good for people while causing the least harm and being deployed in an ethical way? Does anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I agree. I think because it's just, there's so many pressing issues, it's hard for us to stay more focused on the real positives. But the positives are what I call the collaborative arrangements, where people work with technology to have greater effect than either could alone. So one way that you would see that in cars are the guardian concept, and indeed Toyota had this concept. I'm not sure if they're doing anything active with it right now, but the idea is that you keep people from doing dumb things. You allow them to enjoy the driving experience and maybe relax under the driving experience, but keep them engaged in the driving experience, and also understanding that the human driver has the best sensors on the planet, their eyes and brain, and they're going to be able to resolve a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. I work a lot in aviation. We work on developing robots to help pilots as co-pilots. We even recently developed a robotic system that listens for rogue drones, but the artificial intelligence inside of it is brittle, like all of AI with deep learning algorithms. And so when a system thinks it hears a drone, it basically calls a human, and it has the human listen to what's happening, and then the human can actually resolve the uncertainty way better than the AI. So they work together to actually achieve a really great outcome. And so
they have burglar alarms like that. There's literally a salesman tried to call my shop recently and go, "We have this new thing where there's sensors we place around your property, and if they detect certain types of noises, they call the office. The human looks at the cameras, and there's speakers, and a human yells out the loud hail, 'Hey, get out of here!' And they say, like, it's it was very expensive, this service, but like that, she just described it.
That's so
pretty
funny.
much. Yeah, and what you just said before with the Toyota system, Alex Roy has talked about it as well, the parallel versus series autonomy, the so-called uncrashable car, where you do all the driving, but the sensors are ready to save you if you fuck up. That's like a much better way to integrate the best thing that humans are good at and the thing that computers are good at, right? Just like super good traction control and stuff.
Yeah, and I think we'll get there. I think that will be part of the snapback to all these problems with technology, that we will start to get more collaborative systems. And the onus is on me as a researcher to figure out how to make it cool. Because if I can figure out how to make it cool and be as cool as a Tesla, then I think we could get products like that to market even faster.
Yeah. Well, I'm pro EV. I have a few weird old cars, and I have a Ford Mach-E that I like a lot. And I turned off the adaptive steering. I turned off all the lane keep shit. But it is nice. It's like a Tesla that's screwed together properly. Were there any last minute questions from folks for Missy before we cruise out?
Last
one. I don't even know if that is based in truth. I don't even want to read that. Is that actually truth?
I mean, I read it. I think it's one of those like whataboutism things. The person's like, if Elon's team can meet NASA requirements, why can't Tesla do that with autonomous vehicles? But they're totally different environments.
Yeah.
There's no bicyclists in space.
Yeah.
It's just it's a completely different set of parameters.
It's a different skill set.
I understand that. Like, well, if they're so smart at this, why can't they do this? Because doing things that are very complicated is challenging.
Isn't it weird, Missy?
But I actually think it's a great question.
Go ahead. Well, address it.
It's great because I get this question all the time. People think that making cars drive themselves should be easier than having planes or rockets fly themselves. And it's exactly the opposite. because of the third dimension of altitude, when you're in a plane, there's not 50 other idiots right next to you in their own planes.
Yeah.
And so,
If there are, by the way,
so
you are
much
really
slower.
doing something really right in your life. If you're flying next to like 50 other people rolling, you're like, yes, something's gone very well in your life, actually, right? For at least a minute or two
Or
until
very
you all
wrong.
crash and die.
This is why flying cars is a bad idea, because then there will be 50 idiots.
Oh
around
my
you.
God! Don't get me started on fucking flying cars. Flying cars. I'm so tired of fucking flying cars. Like, stop.
Well, I won't tell you about the papers I've written on those, but you're right. I don't think they're coming anytime soon.
Oh my God, flying cars drive me nuts. I gotta be honest, those personal drone things that you know, one person, like, you know, it's like a very powerful drone that a human sits in. It looks like fun, but I don't want to see them shits all over the sky. I'd be like, you're being attacked by locusts all day.
Yeah.
Get out of here with that.
Just build a train. Just build a good train for everybody.
Even in Back to the Future 2, which has probably the most realistic depiction of what flying cars would be like, the skyway is jammed. There's traffic when there's flying cars. If you regulate.
Same with Fifth Element.
Yeah, exactly. Missy, I know you don't come to LA often, but if you do, we would love to feed you bourbon and have you tell us stories of flying fighter jets. That got buried in there, but I think that sounds like a good use of your time.
It sounds good. I'm in LA actually quite a bit, so you never know when I'll take you up on that.
Well, we're right by LAX, so please come see us and do another show and talk about other things. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise, I really appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, we'll have to upgrade our minutes or something.
I already sent the email.
Oh, Zach
I sent the email.
Zach already sent the customer service email. Yeah, we're good. We should be on the premium plan. This is bullshit.
WTF.
This is bullshit, man. Thank you so much. And Missy is a great follow on Twitter. It's Missy MISSY _Cummings. She's a really one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter in this space because she really breaks down very complex concepts in a really simple and straightforward way. So thank you so much for your time, and everyone else out there, thank you for listening. We're back tomorrow, Zach. I think we have a podcast every single day. We have 5 podcasts this week. So live people, you're getting an earful of us this week. We're back tomorrow afternoon, and thank you everybody, and have a great night. Bye.